And I was reading this article this past week, and I saw this quote in the article, and it said, "Plans are useless, but planning is essential." And I thought about it, and I was like, "Man, that is so true." Planning is almost like preparation, right? You have an idea, you have a map of what you want to do, and a structure of things that you want to put in place, right, to accomplish whatever this thing is or this goal is you're trying to do. And a plan helps you to get from step to step within that process.
What are we planning for? Like life or projects?
Anything. Planning, you should be planning for literally everything in life. Even when we plan, I think the expectation should be, I probably won't use the bulk of this planning, but it's still important. And that's why I'm having this pod today, because I want to share some tips on how to plan, or the best way to plan. And then, just give you reasons why it's essential, why planning is essential. All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the new episode of the Myles Munroe podcast. As always, the vision and goal of this podcast is to entertain, educate, and elevate you miles high above your fears, your doubts, and any limitations that you may think exist, always knowing that those limitations only exist in your mind. All right? So today I want to have a conversation. I want to talk about planning, right, and the importance of planning. And I was reading this article this past week, and I saw this quote in the article, and it said, "Plans are useless, but planning is essential." And I thought about it, and I was like, man, that is so true, right? Plans are useless, but planning is essential, right? And as I was kind of doing some research for this pod, I came across this quote that says, "No battle plan survives contact with the enemy." No battle plan survives contact with the enemy. And again, it takes me back to, the quote I read initially that said, "Plans are useless, but planning is essential." So, it's good to set plans, but, very rarely do things go according to plan, right? Nothing happens the way that we map it out in our heads or the way that we map it out on paper. There's always something that happens, right? And, back to this battle quote, anyone that has a plan going into battle, usually when you make contact with the enemy, something has to change, right? Because you can't predict what the enemy is going to do or what is going to happen, in the process of you executing your plan. Whether it's something that is uncontrollable, whether it's something that it happens unexpectedly. Things happen, and plans usually have to change, right? But it is important to plan despite the inherent unpredictability of life. Even though we can't be sure that the plans we're putting in place, we'll be able to execute them as we lay them out, or as we have laid them out. It's still important for us to plan. It's imperative for us to plan, right? Because planning is almost like preparation, right? You have an idea, you have a map of what you want to do, and a structure of things that you want to put in place, right, to accomplish whatever this thing is or this goal is you're trying to do. And a plan helps you to get from step to step within that process. Plans are based usually on assumptions, right? So you use the best information you have available at the time, and you make a plan, right? But when new information or unforeseen events come into play, it can render most plans useless. But planning is still important. So usually the information that we get, the information that we have available to us, we set a plan, right? We put things in place. We usually plan based off of experiences. We plan based off of statistics. We plan based off of our desires, our assumptions that things will probably happen in this manner. But the majority of the time, there has to be some adjustments made in the process, right? But planning is essential, right? And the reason why it's good to plan, the value that planning brings to our lives and that planning gives us is it helps us with our mindset, right? Our preparation. It prepares our mind for the task at hand. So at least, at the least, there's a step A, right? There's a step 1 that we take, and we kind of take it from there, right? If everything goes smoothly with step 1, then you move on to step 2, and it's not until something changes or something doesn't go according to plan where that's where adjustments need to be made. And then planning helps, or it sets the framework for decision making, right? So usually when you plan, you kind of scope out the entire project. You kind of lay out and structure out the complete job or the complete goal that you're trying to achieve, right? And you base your movements or your decisions from point A to point B to point C, and throughout the process of this task, based on the information that you have available. So it just sets the framework for decision making, because even in planning, you can prepare for changes to be made, right? So you could do what's that? There was this in math. There's to be this process where. No, when you used to, it was like rocket, then PEMDAS. No, man.
PEMDAS.
You say Venn diagrams?
No, it's PEMDAS.
PEMDAS. No, when it say, okay, so if you come to a point and you have 2 options you could make, right? And if it's this option, you go this way. If it's that option, you go this way. Something I forget it. I forget the term. It's some type of graph. Yeah, I forget the name of the graph. My bad. I just drawn a blank. But that's what planning. Like when I plan, right? When I put plans together.
What are we planning for? Like life
anything,
or projects?
Anything. Planning. You should be planning for literally everything in life. Like at the end of the year, when I ask you, when I ask
This is
you,
not about me.
When I ask you, what are your plans for next year?
To survive.
But I ask you detail, like, what's the goals you have, what's things you have set in place or whatever.
Pray.
So you just can pray. You ain't gonna put nothing on paper.
The Lord is able.
Nah, so anything, right? If you like, I start with planning my year, right? And I break my year down into segments of projects, of goals that I've set, whether it's personal goals, professional goals, spiritual goals. And I plan everything out. So when I'm talking about planning, I'm talking about planning every aspect of your life the best you can, right? Obviously, like I'm saying, things don't go according to plan, right? Because plans are useless, but planning is essential, right? So the majority of the time, even when we plan, I think the expectation should be, I probably won't use the bulk of this planning, but it's still important.
Well, I think it's easier said than done, because some people come from a planning family and others don't, so
you could at me
at MR.
Whoa. What was that?
No, seriously, but like some people, like they don't know what it is to plan. They've never planned. It's just, and some people are incapable of planning. They don't know how to plan.
Right, and that's why I'm having this pod today, because I want to share some tips on how to plan, or the best way to plan. And then, just give you reasons why it's essential, or why planning is essential, right? So let's use you as an example.
Don't use me.
No, so you don't come from a planning background.
I don't.
You have never, I think you don't plan much in advance, right? No. You plan
short term.
As things come about. I'm more of an advanced planner.
10-year planner.
Yeah, I have those type of years into my planning, and I kind of just work backwards.
And what's funny is, like, everyone knows you. Like, me and my friends, we crack jokes all the time. She'll be like, Chara already planned your future for 20 years from now. And like, she, like, everyone knows that you're such a planner. So they'd be like, well, how does Chara do this? I'm like, listen, he is a very consistent individual. So you can't even like he is different.
But you've gotten better though. Like I've low-key noticed you planning, and especially planning from the point of doing things way in advance. I wouldn't say you necessarily used to think about things like, weeks in advance or days in advance prior to having to like do something. So I think this the structure or this planning structure is rubbing off on you, and I'm proud to say that.
Off. It's there.
And you would say that it has helped?
I would. It's causes less anxiety. Mainly less anxiety, and then you once you do it, it's done. You don't have to worry about it anymore.
And then the earlier you start planning, or like if you plan, usually it's easier to make adjustments when the plan is set, because you already know, like, I've gotten to this point, this is what I've put down that I want to do or how I want to plan things out. Okay, something happened, I need to make an adjustment. What's the quick I need a quick thing, a quick pivot that I need to do. And usually it's easier when you have a plan in place rather than just kind of doing things, all willy-nilly, and something happens and then you just stuck, and you crying, you upset, you emotional, and you can't think straight because you didn't have a plan in place to start with. But again, that's why the value of planning, it helps with your mindset and the preparation that you need from a mindful standpoint. And then it sets the framework for your decision making. Like I was just saying, like if you have a plan, your decisions become easier, or, can become easier, because some decisions could be difficult depending on what happens. But a lot of the times, most of the times, the decision making is made a bit easier with a plan, because you sort of could, see what the next steps need to be or what they could be, and you can adjust your plans accordingly. But with the unpredictability of life, one of the major things that we need to do when it comes to planning is we need to be flexible and we need to be adaptable. Our mental agility is very important, right? I think I am always, the way I practice this is I try not to do the same things the same way whenever I'm doing a task, right? And I feel like the more ways that I can practice doing something differently, it allows me to carry that over into other aspects of my life, right? And it expands my mind and my mental capacity when it comes to needing to pivot, when it comes to needing to be flexible and to change, because something that may have worked, or part of something that may have worked in another situation, or in another goal or plan that I had, I might could use that and adjust that and kind of bring that into something totally different, something unrelated to what that was initially for. But because the principle of planning and how it works, I can take certain things that I've planned in other areas and, use them and be flexible with them in other aspects of planning. And that just helps me with my ability to be adaptable, my ability to be flexible. And then it helps me to be able to think of how I can adjust on the fly. I've always wanted to be a person who was able to just think on the fly. I never wanted to be someone that, sets a plan, tries to execute this plan, something happens and it throws everything off, and then I'm stuck, right? I could kind of remember the first time that I recognized my ability to think on the fly. And this was something simple, right? I was back in high school at the time, and I was doing a cookout. We were selling cookout tickets, and we had purchased some meat for the cookout tickets. We had seasoned the meat, and not knowing any better, we seasoned. It was like 2 cases of chicken. So let's say it was about 200 pieces of chicken, and we used these big bins that we cleaned out, and we put the chicken in, and we seasoned the chicken up. But we left the chicken in the bins unrefrigerated, like just out, right? So the next day, obviously the chicken spoiled, and it was like, man, like this was basically all of the protein that we were using for this cookout that we were having. And I remember some people who was a part of this this cookout and the planning of it wasn't able, like, they couldn't think straight. Like, all they saw was, man, spoiled chicken, we can't have this cookout anymore. Oh, and by the way, the chicken was spoiled the morning of the cookout, right? So think of, you have 200 pieces of chicken, you're sitting out spoiled, you can't use none of it. You have a cookout that you're supposed to be putting on in a couple of hours. Like, what do you do? And, I immediately went into resourceful mode. Okay, who do I know? I knew this lady who had a restaurant. I contacted her. I was like, yo, explain her the situation. And she decided to assist me. And, through that adjustment, through being flexible, and just through having that mental agility to pivot and just try to come up with a plan B, we were able to still pull off the cookout. And only people who knew, who were a part of the preparation of everything, knew that we had that problem that morning. And I looked back on that day, a few days after that had happened, and I was like, man, I kind of shocked. I didn't realize it in the moment, but after the fact, I just was like, man, that was impressive. I was impressed with just the calmness that I had and the quickness that I displayed in just being able to pivot. Even when, everyone else was a bit emotional and just kind of like crying over everything and figuring, okay, we can't have to cook it no more. For me, it was like, nope, we got to try and make this happen. What can I do? What can we do? Who do we know? What resources can we bring into the picture to still try and pull this off? So, the flexibility that we need, the adaptability that we need, it helps us to foster a proactive mindset, which I explained in my example just now. And then it also helps us to be critical thinkers and problem solvers. So again, the more we practice, the more we think on these things, the more that we prepare and plan, I think the better prepared we are for adjustments and any flexibility that needs to be made or that needs to be had. I think the biggest misconception about planning is that planning is a waste of time. And, I guess rightly so, because to start off this part, I said that plans are useless, but planning is essential, right? So one would say, well, if plans are useless, what's the point in planning? But the need for us to plan is so that we can be able to adjust, so that we can go into it with a mindset that is prepared to execute this plan, but also a mindset that is prepared to be flexible and make adjustments as needed. And this is, Sharice and I have had this conversation a lot, because when she and I first started dating, I remember the first time I asked her, what are your plans for next year? This is us going into the new year. You have any goals you set for next year? And she looked at me like I was crazy, like, like next year. This year ain't even finished yet. What I think about next year for? And she's right though, because I think I'm the way that I am because I saw my parents as planners, and they would sit us down and they would have us like write out our goals for next year, whatever they were, and with writing out those goals, okay, let's write some strategies on how we can get there. And I think the older I got, well, the older we get, right? The older everyone gets, I think the better we are at not just planning, but the better we are at being able to adapt and be flexible, right? Because with age comes experience, with age comes wisdom, right? So usually the older you get, the less things that you've never experienced before, right? And that means that the older you get, the less you're surprised at things that can happen. Give you a good example. So we, in 2020, end of 2019, we were in this kind of phase where no one knew what was going on, right? We started to hear these whispers of this virus that was going around, and it was killing people, and didn't know exactly who it was killing, why it was killing them, but we just knew that it was the whispers that it was spreading fast. And then going into 2020, we got into this period of COVID, and the world shut down. But I can guarantee you that if something like this was to happen again, our generation would be better prepared for it, right? Because it's something that we've been through before. We went through it for the first time, so it was a new experience. It was a new feeling, a new set of emotions that we went through. But because we went through it, we came through it, we understood the good and the bad of those situations. If something like this were to happen again, I think our response and the way that we are able to adapt to, the world shutting down again, I think it's going to be much easier than it was in 2020 for everyone, right? And that's how that's what aging does for us, right? That's what experience does for us, and that's why I make it a point to try to not to do the same things the same way each time I have to do them, right? Because I want to build up my capacity to be as flexible and as adaptable as possible when it comes to problem solving. I want to ensure that I'm not only going through the experiences, right, and figuring out what works from what doesn't work, but I'm also noticing what others do, the decisions they make, how they make it, how did those decisions work? If I were to use something similar in my situations, how would I adjust it? What could I take from it? What could I leave? And what could I add it, from myself? So it's a scenario of trial and error for the most part, right? But I don't think we'll be able to get to this point unless we start to plan and be intentional about our planning, right? Because I think it's important to plan. I just wanted to leave some tips. This is some stuff that I've shared with Sharice in her planning journey. Hopefully this is able to help you as well. The first thing is, I think we need to set a clear goal, right? Not only a clear goal, but a goal that is achievable, right? You don't want to just throw something out there that isn't feasible for us to accomplish as the types of individuals that we are, right? So we got to set clear goals. Then we have to identify the possible risks and obstacles that we can face. So again, I think that step is easier the older we get and the more we experience. But regardless of age, regardless of where you are in life, I think you should be able to assume what some of the risk or some of the obstacles could be in the situations that you're in and what you're planning for. And then the last thing is to always review and adjust as needed, right? And I think that's the step that happens, that needs to happen more frequent than anything else. There should always be a time of revision and a time of adjustment if necessary. So planning is important. Again, this quote that I saw: plans are useless, but planning is essential. It's an oxymoron, right? For the most part. But I think it's a principle. It's a principle that we all should try to comprehend and understand, and somehow internalize it so that we can start applying it to every aspect of our lives. Okay. Today's milestone that I want to leave with you is very simple, right? It says a good plan is like a roadmap. It shows the destination and usually the best way to get there. A good plan is like a roadmap. It shows the destination and usually the best way to get there. And essentially, if I'm sure all of us have used our mobile phones as a means of finding our way from point A to point B, right? We pull our phones out, put the address in, and then it gives us a few options, right? Gives us options of the ways that we can get to our destination. Some options are faster than others, but it's going to cost us more. Some options are slower than others, but it'll be less of a burden as far as expenses are concerned. Some options, it shows us the traffic that's involved. Some options, it shows us the delays that may occur. So you have to pick the best options that you see fit, right? But even when you're on that journey, unexpected things could happen, right? An unexpected traffic delay could happen. An unexpected occurrence could happen with you on that journey. So the goal is just to be adaptable, because there's always more than one way to get to your destination. So the goal should be not only just to think of one path or one way to get there, but have multiple ways in mind, just in case of what can happen unpredictably. All right. So that brings us to the end of this pod. I just want to encourage you and challenge everyone out there to just become planners, right? Not only plan your future, but plan your present as well. Try to plan every aspect of your life, and hopefully, it'll give you and provide you with that mindset that you need to be adjustable, to be flexible, and to be proactive in your journey to accomplishing and crushing your goals. All right. So as always, the goal of this podcast is to entertain, educate, and elevate you miles high above your fears, your doubts, and any limitations that you may think exist, always knowing that those limitations only exist in your mind. All right. Until next time, you guys stay blessed.